The Harper family moved into the old house on a muted October afternoon. The sky hung low with mist, and the dark expanse of Meriton Lake lapped lazily at the shore just beyond the back garden. The house, a once grand Victorian manor with sagging eaves and moss-choked chimneys, seemed to brood over the water. "It's perfect," Lydia Harper whispered, her breath fogging the chill air. Her husband, Mark, squeezed her hand. Their two children, Ellie and Sam, chased each other through the withered rose garden, their laughter threading thinly through the thick silence. The locals had been less enthusiastic. "They call it Villa Drownin'," the old shopkeeper had muttered as he bagged their groceries that first week. "Best you not stay too long." When Mark asked why, the man only shook his head, lips thinning. Bad water, bad memories. The Harpers didn't listen. City life had drained them. Here they hoped to patch the cracks that had spread quietly through their marriage. They unpacked their lives into Villa Drownin', dusted the cobwebs from the banisters, and ignored the slow, constant drip from the tarnished faucets. The house had its quirks. The upstairs bathtub coughed up brackish water that smelled faintly of rot. Footsteps echoed in the halls when no one walked. Ellie spoke of a woman who visited her at night. "The lady in the wet dress," she called her, and Sam awoke screaming more nights than not. Lydia grew restless. During the days, she wandered to the lake's edge. The reeds hissed secrets to her, and when she gazed into the still water, images shimmered just below the surface. A dark-haired woman in a flowing dress, standing with 3 small children at her sides. Their faces blurred and indistinct, their outlines wavering as if submerged. The woman would smile gently, beckoning Lydia closer, her dress drifting like seaweed around her ankles. Mark noticed her distraction. "You okay?" he asked one evening, as thunder growled low across the lake. Lydia nodded. Her eyes never left the water. "I'm fine, just thinking." That night, the laughter in the halls grew louder. It gurgled, bubbling wetly like giggles echoing through submerged tunnels. Ellie and Sam whispered to each other in bed about the lady who sang them songs in a voice like rushing water. And Lydia dreamed of drowning, cool arms wrapped around her, pulling her under, cradling her as silt and shadow swallowed her whole. She began to see Villa's story clearly then. Villa Carmody had lived here nearly a century ago, abandoned by her husband, driven mad by grief and isolation. She had led her 3 children into the lake on a storm-heavy night and pressed them gently beneath the surface until they no longer struggled. No one had seen her again, but on windless evenings, ripples crossed the glassy lake, and the locals whispered that she still wandered the shallows, searching for more. On the 7th night, as wind rattled the window panes and rain sheeted against the glass, Lydia woke with a start. Her feet were soaked. A frigid wind coiled through the house, and the distant sound of waves murmured in her ears. Her nightdress clung to her as she drifted through the open back door, her steps slow and dreamlike. The grass squelched underfoot. Lightning flickered across the lake, painting the water silver. She stepped in. The water welcomed her, rising eagerly to her waist. Somewhere in the darkness, a soft voice crooned, "They'll be safer with me." The next morning, Mark awoke to an unnatural stillness. The rain had ceased, and the lake lay blank and dull under a slate sky. The children did not come down for breakfast. He found them in their beds, their small faces pale and serene, their hair fanned on their pillows as if they slept beneath water. Their lips were tinged blue, their skin cool and damp. Lydia was nowhere in the house. The back door yawned open. It was old Mrs. Craddock, the neighbor who found her later, curled on the muddy shore. Her dress was soaked, her eyes wide and unblinking. She rocked slowly, lips parting in a hoarse, vacant chant. She needed more. She needed more. No charges were filed. The coroner declared it a tragic coincidence. Carbon monoxide, perhaps, or an undetected leak of some poisonous gas. The Harpers' deaths were folded into the thick folklore of Villa Drownin', just one more grim tale in its long, sodden history. The house still stands by Meriton Lake. The mist still curls thick over the water, and on still nights, when the reeds sway without wind, a soft voice carries across the shallows, beckoning, "They'll be safer with me." The blood moon hung low and swollen over the jagged pines, painting the remote clearing in sickly red light. The cabin, weather-beaten and hunched beneath decades of moss and rot, squatted at the lake's edge like a forgotten relic. Inside, 4 friends huddled around an old coffee table, laughing louder than they felt comfortable. Okay, Jordan grinned, holding his phone up. One last stupid internet ritual before we call it a night. I swear Mia rolled her eyes, but didn't protest. Beside her, Cassie uncorked the last of the wine, while Tyler fished out 4 black candles from his backpack, props he'd picked up from a Halloween clearance bin. I still think it's lame we didn't go skinny dipping, Cassie mumbled, but she was smiling. Anything beat listening to the wind creak through the empty woods. Jordan cleared his throat dramatically. It's called the Villa Ritual. I found it on Reddit, a cult thread with like 2,000 upvotes. You chant her name 13 times while bleeding into a salt circle under a blood moon. Apparently, she comes to grant a wish. His voice dipped mockingly serious. Or kill you horribly depending on the comments section. Mia shook her head but helped arrange the candles anyway. A ring of coarse salt dusted the cracked tabletop. Tyler passed out a pin. One by one, they pricked their fingers and let drops of crimson fall into the circle. Ready? Jordan smirked. He didn't wait for a response before starting the chant. Villa, Villa, Villa. Their voices stumbled at first but soon fell into uneasy unison. The flames from the black candles danced erratically, guttering as if in protest. Villa, Villa, Villa. By the 13th repetition, the friends exchanged awkward glances. Nothing happened. Jordan snorted. Guess Reddit's full of crap. Big shock. Relieved, Mia leaned back on her palms. Thank God I don't... Knock, knock, knock. All 4 froze. The knocking echoed from the front door, slow and deliberate. 3 raps, followed by silence so thick it pressed on their eardrums. Did you invite someone else up here? Cassie's voice wavered. Jordan shook his head, frowning. We're 30 miles from the nearest town. The door swung open on rusted hinges. A woman stood on the threshold. Her sundress clung to her thin frame, heavy and dripping with dark water. Hollow eyes stared from a face that stretched too tightly over bone, and when she smiled, her teeth shimmered like wet glass. You called, she said softly. The cabin groaned. A deep tremor rippled through the floorboards, and the walls shuddered as dark water bled from the cracks. From the corners of the ceiling and beneath the windowsills, viscous rivulets trickled down in pulsing streams, pooling at their feet. Tyler stumbled back, gasping. His shoes sank into the softening floor. Black water licked at his ankles, rising impossibly fast. I didn't mean it, he cried, clawing at the tabletop. His scream splintered the air as his body was yanked downward, legs disappearing into the waterlogged wood. His chest folded next, until with a wet pop he was gone beneath the floor, leaving only expanding ripples. Mia choked on a sob. We have to go. Cassie doubled over, coughing violently. Her hands clawed at her throat, nails raking bloody trails down her neck. A thin line of water trickled from her nostrils. Her lips parted, and an impossible gush of lake water poured from her mouth, flooding her lungs from the inside. Her body convulsed, spasming against the floor as her skin paled to waxen gray. Jordan grabbed Mia's wrist, yanking her toward the door, but the woman Villa was already inside. Her feet made no sound as she drifted forward, water dripping endlessly from her sundress onto the warped floorboards. This is what you wanted, she whispered, tilting her head unnaturally far to the side. To summon something. Jordan screamed as Villa's outstretched fingers brushed his forehead. His skin crackled like thin ice, and in an instant, fissures split open across his face. Water burst from within, sluicing down his cheeks and pouring from his eyes. His body collapsed in a heap, dissolving into a pool of brackish sludge. Mia fled. She stumbled down the dark hall, breath tearing raggedly from her throat. The walls shivered, bleeding more water. Her phone buzzed frantically in her back pocket, the screen flickering erratically. Light bulbs popped one by one as she staggered into the back bedroom. She locked herself inside a closet and curled into the shadows, phone gripped tight. Her thumbs flew over the screen, texting blindly, 911, Help remote cabin friend's dead woman, please." The phone flickered. Static crackled faintly from the speaker. Outside the closet, water sloshed against the door. The dripping slowed, then stopped. Silence. Her phone screen blinked off, then on. The background flickered, her usual lock screen replaced by grainy looping footage of Villa's hollow eyes staring directly into the camera. "You called, Mia." Mia dropped the phone with a strangled gasp, curling into herself. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as her breath misted in the cold air. Shadows lengthened unnaturally around her, stretching like grasping fingers. The red glow of the blood moon dimmed as clouds swallowed the sky. When police arrived 2 days later, they found the cabin crumbling and long abandoned. Dust-coated rotted furniture, mold blossomed black across the walls. 3 skeletonized remains were fused into the warped floorboards, their bones waterlogged and brittle. In the dry bathtub of the collapsed bathroom, they found Mia. She sat curled on her side, lips blue, whispering softly to herself over and over. "She's in the Wi-Fi. She's in the Wi-Fi. She's in the Wi-Fi." Her phone, corroded and shorted beyond recognition, displayed only a single unending message on the cracked screen. "You called." The Whitlock Asylum for the Mentally Unwell shut its doors in the winter of 1937. Snow had settled thickly across the crumbling brickwork, shrouding its dark past in a deceptive hush. Official records blame the closure on catastrophic structural failure. Locals, however, speak of the 3rd floor and of Dr. Elias Whitlock's final patient. His journal, recovered decades later, is fragmented and water-stained, yet certain passages endure, their handwriting steady but frantic. Patient 5 found wandering Briar Lake, female, approximately 30, barefoot, soaked, muttering, "They're waiting beneath, no identification, no known relatives." Calm but unsettling gaze, as if listening to a distant voice just beyond reach. Patient V, later referred to simply as Villa, arrived in October of 1936. The asylum staff, hardened veterans of electroshock and insulin therapy, found themselves disquieted in her presence. Villa never raised her voice. She never lashed out. She sat serene, staring at the tiled floors or the murky windows with an air of hollow patience. "They're still hungry," she would murmur to herself at dawn, her voice threading through the halls long before the orderlies stirred. Dr. Whitlock, progressive for his time, was captivated. His journal speaks of her thinness, of her gray-tinged skin, and most notably of her hydrophobia, a supposed fear of water contradicted by her fixation on it. The first tragedy struck during a routine hydrotherapy session. Villa had been scheduled for a standard treatment, immersion in lukewarm water intended to soothe agitation. Yet as her body touched the surface, her expression shifted, not in fear, but relief. At that same moment, across the hall, a patient named Miriam Halstead drowned in her bath. No struggle, no splashing, simply submerged, lungs filling as though compelled. An hour later, orderly Jensen collapsed in the sanitation trough, his face twisted, lips blue. By day's end, 3 more deaths, all by drowning, all inexplicable. Water pressure fine, pipes functional, no leaks, yet water seeps under every threshold. Taste of silt on air, impossible. Whitlock's notes grow unhinged after that. He wrote of waking at night to the sound of laughter gurgling from the drains, of Villa's eyes following him no matter where he stood, of damp footprints trailing from her cell, though her body never left the bed. His final entry reads, "Tonight I attempt transorbital intervention. Villa cannot stay. Voices grow louder. If I sever connection to source, perhaps..." What happened next is known only from the rescue team's report. On the night of November 2nd, the asylum's sole night nurse, Esther Cranley, staggered into town, hysterical and soaked to the bone. She claimed the asylum was drowning. Authorities dispatched a rescue party within the hour. They found the front doors ajar. The first 2 floors were bone dry, but on the 3rd floor, Water dripped from every crack, pooled in thick puddles along the warped wooden planks, though there had been no rainfall for days. The wallpaper bubbled and peeled, heavy with moisture. A foul brine hung in the air. They discovered Dr. Whitlock's body in the hydrotherapy suite. The door was bolted from the inside. His corpse sat upright in a rusted chair, waterlogged and bloated, his empty eyes fixed on the wall. There, in what investigators described as algae-slicked script, was a message scratched deep into the plaster. They're still hungry. Of Villa, there was no trace. The asylum was condemned shortly after. Over the decades, locals avoided the grounds, but stories persisted. Teenagers who snuck in dared each other to ascend the rotting staircases to the third floor. Most fled before reaching the landing, citing an unbearable pressure, like deep water pressing against their chests. Those few who lingered spoke of puddles that never dried, no matter how parched the summer, of bubbles rising lazily from cracks in the floorboards, of distant childish giggles burbling from forgotten drains, and always the damp footprints. Today the ruins remain. The asylum's brickwork is choked with ivy, windows shattered to hollow sockets. Yet on humid days, one can see condensation creeping up the glass, and sometimes faintly dripping echoes long after the rain has stopped. Whitlock's journal sits under glass at the County Historical Society. Page corners curled, ink bled outward like veins. On the last yellowed leaf, a final phrase, scrawled in a hand not quite like his own. Come up to the third floor, the water's warm,